Les Chants de Maldoror by le Comte de Lautréamont. Canto 3, Section 1. Let us recall the names of those imaginary beings of angelic nature, creations of a single mind, who, in the second song, shone with a light of their own. Once born, they die, like the sparks whose swift extinction on the burning paper the eye can hardly follow. Le Man, Lohengrin, Lombano, Holzer. For a moment, you appeared on my charmed horizon, covered in the insignia of youth, but I let you fall back into chaos, like diving bells. You will never come forth again. It is enough for me to keep the memory of you. You must give way to other substances less beautiful, perhaps, engendered by the stormy flood of a love resolved not to quench its thirst with the human race, a hungering love which would devour itself if it did not seek sustenance in celestial fictions, creating in the long run a pyramid of seraphim more numerous than the insects which swarm in a drop of water. He will weave them into an ellipse which he will whirl around himself. During this time, the traveler, who has dropped at the sight of a cataract, will, if he looks up, see a human being in the distance, borne towards hell's depths on a garland of living camellias. But silence! The floating image of the fifth ideal slowly takes shape, like the blurred nuances of the aurora borealis on the vaporous forefront of my intellect, where it takes on more and more of a precise consistency. Mario and I were going along the Strand. Our horses with straining necks rent the membranes of space and struck sparks from the stones on the beach. The cold blast struck us full in the face, billowing out our cloaks, and the hair of our twin heads was blowing in the wind. The seagull, by its cries and the beating of its wings, tried to warn us of the possible proximity of the tempest. It cried, "Where are they going at this mad gallop?" We said nothing. Plunged in reverie, we let ourselves be borne along on the wings of this wild career. The fishermen, seeing us pass by, swift as the albatross, and believing that here, fleeing before him, were two mysterious brothers, so called because they were always together, hastened to make the sign of the cross, and hid with his petrified dog behind a huge boulder. Those who lived on the coast had heard strange things told of these two characters, who would appear on earth amid the clouds in times of great calamity, when a dreadful war threatened to thrust its harpoon into the breasts of two enemy countries, or cholera, with its sling, was preparing to hurl death and corruption into entire cities. The oldest beachcombers would frown gravely as they explained that these two phantoms, the vast span of whose black wings everyone had noticed in hurricanes, above sandbanks and reefs, were the spirit of the earth and the spirit of the sea, whose majestic forms would appear in the sky during the great revolutions of nature, and who were joined together by eternal friendship, the rarity and glory of which have astonished the endless cable of generations. It was said that flying side by side like two Andean condors, they liked to hover in concrete circles among the layers of the atmosphere nearest to the sun, that in those regions they lived on the purest essence of light, that with great reluctance they decided to direct their vertical light down towards the orbit in which the fear-stricken human globe deliriously revolves, inhabited by cruel spirits who massacre one another on the fields where battle rages, when they are not treacherously and perfidiously killing one another with the dagger of hatred or ambition in the middle of towns, and who feed on beings as full of life as themselves, but lower down in the scale of existence, or when, to urge men to repentance by the strophes of their prophecies, they firmly resolve to swim with huge and powerful strokes toward the sidereal regions, where a planet moved amid the thick exhalations of greed, pride, imprecations, and sneers, which rose like pestilential vapors from its hideous surface. This planet seemed only as big as a bowl, being almost invisible because of the distance, and there, sure enough, there were many opportunities for them to regret bitterly their spurned and misunderstood kindness. And they went and hid in the bowels of volcanoes to converse with the enduring fires of lava which bubble in vats in the center of the earth, or at the bottom of the sea, where their disillusioned gaze could linger pleasantly on the fiercest monsters of the depths, who seemed models of gentleness in comparison with the bastards of mankind. And then, when the propitious darkness of night fell, they would rush out of the porphyry-crested craters and from the undersea currents, leaving behind them the stony chamber pot where the constipated anus of the human cockatoo strains, till they could no longer make out the shape of the vile planet suspended in space. Distressed at their fruitless attempt, the spirit of the earth and the spirit of the sea embraced and wept amid the stars who shared their grief, and beneath God's eye. Mario and he, who galloped by his side, were not unaware of the vague and superstitious rumors spread by fishermen, as, with the doors bolted and windows closed, they whispered to one another around the fireside of an evening, while the night wind, wishing to warm itself, whistles around the straw cabin, shaking with its force the fragile walls, surrounded at the base with shells brought in by the undying undulations of the waves. We were not speaking. What have those who love to say to one another? Nothing. But our eyes expressed everything. I told him to pull his cloak around him more, and he remarked that my horse was moving too far from his. Each of us was as much concerned for the other's life as for his own. We are not laughing. He tries to force a smile. But I notice that his face is deeply lined and bears the terrible weight of reflection, which is constantly struggling with the sphinxes who, with their squinting eyes, baffle mortal intelligence in all its anguished endeavors. Seeing that his attempts are futile, he averts his eyes and bites his earthly rein, raging and foaming at the mouth, and looking towards the horizon which flees at our approach. In turn, I try to remind him of his gilded youth, which need only advance like a queen in the palace of pleasures, but he notices how difficult it is for my thin mouth to utter these words. How the years of my own spring have passed, sad and glacial, like an implacable dream, passing over banquet tables, satin beds where love's pale priestess sleeps, paid with the glitter of gold, and the bitter pleasures of dissolitude, and the torches of sorrow. Seeing that my attempts are futile, I am not surprised that I cannot make him happy. The Almighty appears with his instruments of torture in the resplendent aureole of his horror. I avert my eyes and look towards the horizon, which flees at our approach. Our horses were galloping along shores as if they fled the eyes of men. Mario is younger than I. The dampness of the weather and the salt water which spurts up on us bring cold to his lips. I said to him, "Take care, close your lips on one another. Do you not see the sharp claws of the cold, which will chap your skin, furrowing it with its smarting wounds?" He fixed his eye on my brow and answered with the movements of his tongue. "Yes, I see these green claws, but I will not alter the natural position of my mouth to get rid of them. Since this appears to be the will of Providence, I wish to submit to it. Its will could have been less harsh." And I exclaimed, "I admire this noble revenge." I wanted to tear out my hair, but he forbade me with such a stern look that I obeyed him respectfully. It was getting late. The eagle was returning to its nest amid the jagged mountain rocks. He said, "I will lend you my cloak to protect you from the cold. I do not need mine." I replied, "Woe to you if you do as you say. I do not want another to suffer instead of me, and especially not you." He did not answer because I was right, but I began to comfort him because of the violent and hasty tone in which I had spoken. Our horses were galloping along the shore, as if they fled from the eyes of men. I looked up, like the prow of a ship borne upon a huge wave, and I said to him, "Are you crying? Tell me, King of the Snows and the Fog, I see no tears on your face, lovely as the cactus flower, and your eyes are dry as the bed of the stream. But in the depths of your eyes, I see a blood-filled vessel in which your innocence boils, bitten in the neck by a scorpion of the largest kind. A violent wind blows down on the fire beneath the cauldron, spreading the dark flames outside your sacred eyeball. I moved close to you, my hair near your rosy brow, and I smelt burning because my hair had singed. Close your eyes, for if you do not, your face, burning like the lava of the volcano, will fall in ashes into the palm of my hand." And he turned towards me again, heedless of the reins he was holding in his hands, gazing at me tenderly, raising and lowering his lily eyelids like the ebb and flow of the sea. He wished to reply to my bold question, and did so as follows: "Do not worry about me. Just as the mists of rivers drift over hillsides, and on reaching the top rise into the atmosphere to form clouds, so have your anxieties on my account increased imperceptibly without any reasonable grounds, forming the illusory shape of a desolate mirage in your imagination. I assure you, there is no fire in my eyes, although I feel as if my skull had been plunged into a basin of burning coals. How could my innocent flesh be burning in the cauldron, since I can hear only weak and indistinct cries which are but the moans of the wind passing over our heads? A scorpion could not have taken up residence and fixed his sharp pincers in my torn sockets. Rather, I feel as if there were more powerful tentacles grinding my optic nerves. Yet I am of your opinion that the blood which fills the cauldron was extracted from my veins by an invisible torturer. As I slept at night, I waited a long time for you, beloved son of the ocean. My sleep-weakened arms engaged in vain combat with the one who had stolen into the vestibule of my house. Yes, I feel my soul padlocked in the bolt of my body, and it cannot get out and flee from the shores lashed by human waves, no longer witness to the livid pack of miseries relentlessly pursuing the human lizards over the sloughs and pits of immense despair. But I shall not complain. I received life as a wound, and I have forbidden suicide to heal the scar. I want the Creator to contemplate the gaping crevasse for every hour of his eternity. That is the punishment I inflict on him. Our coursers slow down, their bodies trembling like the hunter set upon by peccaries. They must not start listening to what we are saying. By dint of attention, their intelligence would increase, and they might understand us. Woe to them, for they would suffer more. Just think, in fact, of the bores of mankind. Does it not seem that the degree of intelligence which separates them from other beings has only been granted at the irremediable price of incalculable suffering? Follow my example, and dig your spur into your courser's side. Our horses were galloping along the shore, as if they fled the eyes of men. Section 2. Behold the madwoman dancing along with a vague memory of something in her mind. Children chase after her and throw stones at her, as if she were a blackbird. She brandishes a stick and makes as if to chase them, then continues on her way. She has left a shoe behind on the path, and does not notice. Long spider's legs move on her nape. They are none other than her hair. Her face no longer looks like a human face, and she bursts into fits of laughter, like a hyena. She utters scraps of sentences in which, when they are put together, few would be able to find any clear meaning. Her dress has holes in several places, and moves jerkily to show her bony and mud-bespattered legs. She moves forward in a daze, her youth, her illusions, and her past happiness, which she glimpses through her ruined mind's haze, all swept along like a poplar leaf by the whirl of unconscious powers. She has lost her former grace and beauty. The way she walks is mean and low. Her breath reeks of gin. If men were happy on this earth, it would surprise us. The madwoman reproaches no one. She is too proud to complain, and she will die without revealing her secret to those who are interested in her, but whom she has forbidden even to speak to her. Children chase after her and throw stones at her as if she were a blackbird. She has dropped a roll of paper from her breast. A stranger picks it up, shuts himself in his room all night, and reads the manuscript, which contains the following. After many years of barrenness, Providence blessed me with a child, a girl. For 3 whole days I knelt in churches and never ceased thanking Him who had at last granted my wishes. With my own milk I suckled the child, who meant more to me than my own life. She was endowed with all the good qualities of body and soul, and she grew quickly. She would say to me, "I would like to have a little sister to play with. Ask the good Lord to send me one, and I in return will wreathe a garland of violets, mint, and geraniums." My answer was to sit her on my lap, press her to my breast, and kiss her lovingly. She was already interested in animals and used to ask why it was that the swallow merely brushed against the cottages of men with its wings, without ever daring to enter. But I would put my finger on my mouth as if to tell her to keep silent on this grave question, the rudiments of which I did not wish to explain to her, and perhaps overexcite her childish imagination with too vivid a sensation. And I was anxious to change the subject, which is a painful one for every being who belongs to the race which has imposed its unjust dominion on all the other animals of creation. Whenever she spoke to me of the graves in the cemetery, saying how there one could breathe the pleasant perfumes of cypresses, and immortelles. I was careful not to contradict her, but I said to her that it was the town where the birds lived, that they sang there from morning till dusk, that the graves were their nests where, lifting up the grave lids, they slept at night with their family. It was I who sewed all the pretty little clothes she wore, as well as the lace dress with its 1,000 arabesques, which was reserved for Sundays. In winter, she had her special place by the hearth, for she considered herself an important person. In summer, the meadows felt the gentle pressure of her steps when she ventured out with her silk net on the end of a rush, chasing the wild, free hummingbird and butterflies with their frustrating, zigzagging motion. "What have you been doing, you little scamp? Your soup has been waiting for you for over an hour." But she exclaimed as she flung her arms around my neck that she would never go back there. The next day she was off again, skipping over the daisies and the mignonettes, among the sunbeams and the whirling flight of the ephemera, knowing only life's prismatic glass, none of its rancor yet, glad to be no bigger than the blue-tit, innocently teasing the warbler which does not sing as well as the nightingale, slyly putting her tongue out at the nasty raven, which was looking at her in a fatherly way, graceful as a young cat in her movements. I was not to enjoy her company for much longer. The time was coming near when she would unexpectedly have to say goodbye to life's enchantments, abandoning forever the company of turtle-doves, grouse, and greenfinches, the babbling of the tulip and the anemone, the counsel of the marsh grass, the sharp wit of the frogs, the coolness of the streams. I was told what happened, for I was not present at the event of which my daughter's death was the result. If I had been, I would have defended that angel at the cost of my blood. Maldoror was passing with his bulldog. He sees a young girl sleeping in the shade of a plane tree, and at first he took her for a rose. It is impossible to say which came first to his mind, the sight of this young girl or the resolution which followed. He undresses rapidly, like a man who knows what he's going to do. Stark naked, he flung himself upon the girl, lifting her dress to commit an assault upon modesty in broad daylight. That will not worry him, you may be sure, but let us not dwell on this impure act. Discontented in mind, he hurriedly dressed again, casts a prudent glance towards the dusty path where no one is walking, and orders the bulldog to strangle a blood-bespattered young girl with a snap of his jaws. He points out to the mountain dog the place where the suffering victim is breathing and shrieking, and withdraws from the scene, not wishing to be present, as the sharp teeth enter the pink veins. It seemed to the dog that the execution of this order was harsh. He thought he was being asked to do what had already been done, and contented himself, this monstrous snouted wolf, with violating, in turn, the virginity of this delicate child. From her torn belly the blood flows again along her legs, along the meadow. Her moans join the whining of the animal. The young girl gives him the golden cross which adorned her neck so that he would spare her. She had not dared to show it to the wild eye of him who had first thought of taking advantage of the weakness of her age. But the dog knew well that if he disobeyed his master, a knife thrust from his sleeve would open up his entrails without a word of warning. Maldoror, how revolting to pronounce the name, heard the agonized cries of pain, and was astonished that the victim was so tenacious of life that she was not already dead. He approaches the sacrificial altar and sees the behavior of his bulldog gratifying his base instincts, rising above the young girl as a shipwrecked man raises his head above the waves. He kicks him and cuts one of his eyes. The maddened bulldog flees across the countryside, dragging after him along a stretch of the road, which, though it is short, is still too long, the body of the young girl, which is hanging from him, and which only comes free as a result of the jerky movements of the fleeing dog. But he is afraid of attacking his master, who will never set eyes on him again. He takes an American penknife from his pocket, consisting of 12 blades, which can be used to different uses. He opens the angular claws of his steel hydra, and armed with a scalpel of the same kind, seeing that the green of the grass had not yet disappeared beneath all the blood which had been shed, he prepares, without blenching, to dig his knife courageously into the unfortunate child's vagina. From the widened hole he pulls out, one after another, the inner organs, the guts, the lungs, the liver, and at last, the heart itself, are torn from their foundations and dragged through the hideous hole into the light of the day. The sacrificer notices that the young girl, a gutted chicken, has long been dead. He stops his ravages, which had gone on until then with increasing eagerness, and lets the corpse sleep again in the shade of the plane tree. The knife was picked up where it had been left, a few steps away. A shepherd, a witness of the crime whose author was never discovered, waited until long afterward before telling the tale, until he had made sure that the criminal had reached the frontier and that he no longer had to fear the revenge which would be taken on him if he told the truth. I pitied the madman who had committed this appalling crime, which the legislators had not foreseen and for which there were no precedents. I pitied him because it is likely that his reason deserted him as he went to work with the 12-bladed knife, ripping the viscera from top to bottom. I pity him because if he was not mad, his shameful behavior shows that he must be harboring intense hatred against his fellow beings to swoop so savagely down onto the flesh and arteries of a harmless child, my daughter. I was present at the burial of the last remains, silently resigned, and every day I come and pray over a grave. When he had finished reading this, the stranger's strength fails him, and he faints. He comes to and burns the manuscript. He had forgotten this memory of his youth. How habit dulls the memory. And after an absence of 20 years, he had returned to this fateful land. He will not buy a bulldog. He will not converse with shepherds. He will not sleep in the shade of plane trees. Children chase after her and throw stones at her, as if she were a blackbird.